Okay, so what we're going to have here is a small play at Ansible. Ansible is essentially a scripting engine generator. It allows us to set up a series of blocks in YAML that are going to then be converted or taken and used in a scripting generation engine. Now in here I have an example of a structure of an Ansible layout, and it has a number of folders like the handlers. This is usually when we have services and we are interacting with the service configuration, then we need to restart it, reload it, and so on. That's where handlers usually go. We're not going to get that far. We're going to keep things simple. Actually, we're going to use the lower part, dub one, and we're going to work our way into creating a small Ansible playbook to install Light HTTPD. Another thing we're going to use is a way to protect credentials, and we're going to use ansible-vault as well. But before we go there is a great deal of documentation to dig through, and so Zeal will be our friend. Zeal or Dash, if you're on a Mac, they share the documentation between them, and so you'll be able to have a local a way locally to search for the documentation, dig through all the details. This is amazing. The Linux and the Windows versions is called Zeal. It's open source. Dash is a subscription based, but they share the documentation between them, and so it's really great to have around. And I'll show a few examples of it here and there. And so going back into our documentation here, I have a few commands here as a reference that I'm going to rely on. For example, we're going to start by creating the main playbook YAML file. This is where everything will start. We'll create that file, and then we're going to create an inventory directory. It could also be just a file. In this case, since we want to encrypt some of the inventory's variables, namely the SSH and the escalation privilege, the escalation or the become credential for SU. We're going to use the directory because it's easier to do it that way. We could have created the host file with touch, but I actually have a small shortcut here in my notes. So first we're going to create the roles directory. And under the roles directory, it will there's a somewhat fixed structure. We're going to talk about that. So after this, we're going to create a host file for our inventory. We'll have a group like we see there. In this case, is Debian, and then variables for that group. They'll be the column vars. In this case, we have a number of default variables there. Another thing we're going to use is the strict host key checking. We're going to set that for now. For development purposes, it's really cool. Then we're going to use another trick. Every variable we want to encrypt, we're going to prefix those with vault underscore then something. That's what we have there. So we have the username, we have the Ansible SSH password, and so we're going to create the vault underscore SSH password and the vault become password, like that. Okay. Now we also need to encrypt these variables. So how are we going to do that? That's where the Ansible vault comes in. But before we do that, we're going to create another file called inventory vars. It will also has the same group like Debian vars, because those are the variables that belong to that host group. Okay, if we have multiple hosts, Ansible becomes a lot more useful, right? Because then you can execute the same commands across a number of hosts. Now we want to encrypt what the contents of that file, essentially, right? The inventory host variables, like that. It's really important to keep the groups together in the case of the inventory, okay? Because we want those things to be loaded like that. Otherwise, it won't work. Now I have a Python virtual environment here, and I'm going to use the Ansible Vault to encrypt the inventory vars file. So encrypt inventory. I pass the file name. Will ask me for the password. That's it. It's done. Okay. Credentials are protected now by the almighty encryption. Okay. Then we're going to proceed. Going back here into our tree, we can see the layout of this, and we also can see that we have a tasks, templates, a number of other things. By default, Ansible will search for a file called main.yaml, and so that's one of the reasons why you see vars.main.yaml, tasks, and then main.yaml, and so on. So we'll start our web server.yaml by first creating the root structure of the playbook. In this case, we're going to give it a name, like HTTPD server setup. Simple. Next, we're going to tell which host group this is meant to be executed on. You may have multiple host groups: databases, west, east, firewalls, DC, whatever, Windows. So hosts in question, the inside according to our inventory is Debian. Cool, awesome. What else? Now we have two options: either use roles or tasks. If it's a small playbook, you might want to get away with tasks. If this is meant to expand, like we're planning, I'm planning other videos to build on this, we're going to use roles, right? All of these keys are inside the Ansible documentation, by the way. Now, if you don't like YAML, this might not be for you, because most of this stuff is actually YAML. So now comes how do we tell Ansible to look for a particular role, right? The name of the folder is crucial at this point. So we created a role under roles. We created a folder called www, where we're going to put the tasks for the installation of this light HTTPD demo. So that's exactly the name that we're going to put under that. So we're declaring an array of roles to run with this playbook. And so after that, we'll search for a folder called tasks, and within that folder, it's going to search for a file called main.yaml. There are other ways of making this work without having to rely on this automation, right? You can have files with other names, and there are calls for you to set up those. Next, we're going to open another file here in the roles www tasks main.yaml. Again, we're going to assign it a name for this. We're going to start with something simple to show. I'm going to call it a debug task. And then we're going to use a built-in debug call. Actually, we're going to do a mistake here. We're going to put a name after the debug, which is something that is not there. And we're also going to misalign the argument for the debug there that takes the message. And let's see if we can run this. Ansible playbook, we're going to pass -i with the inventory, ask for a vault pass, and if we don't sell what playbook we want to run, then it doesn't do anything. So we need to pass the playbook web server.yaml, we set the password, and boom, we have a few errors here. There are a number of things to fix, right? So let's see if we can find out what's wrong. Going back here, one of the first things that's clearly wrong is the MSG is an argument of the debug call. So let's save that. We can check that in the documentation. Right, and there's also examples here, right? We can see there how it's supposed to be laid out, right? But there's another mistake there. This time is linearly correct, and we get advanced, but no, then there's something still missing here. So let's go back, let's look at this, and eventually we're going to realize that, yeah, that really doesn't make any sense there, right? And so we're going to clean that and make sure the alignment is just right, because YAML is like that, and rerun it. We passed the vault password once again, and now it runs. Amazing, right? Now we know that our playbook, at least till here, is actually sane. So what to go from here? We could try, for example, see if we can access a variable. This will allow us to confirm that the variables that we encrypted with Vault are actually loaded and we can actually use them, right? So we're going to put under quotes with the brackets there, we're going to put exactly like it, and we're going to rerun this, put the vault password once again, and now in the message we should see the password there. It's an extremely lame password, right? Just showing things here. No state secrets. Now we have established the fundamentals of the playbook. There are a number of other things we want to do. And so having this debug here doesn't really make any sense anymore. So we're going to start to build our real playbook. One of the first things we need to do is the installation of a package. In this case, we're going to install the Lite HTTPD package. And there's exactly a namespace built-in module for Ansible to do just that. It's called Ansible built-in APT, and we can set a single name. We can set a collection of packages like with the pkg. And we can also use variables here, which is the method we're going to use, because that way we don't mess around with the main playbook. Okay, and so we're going to once again set the name and then Ansible built-in APT. Then we're going to use pkg, because it's going to be a list, and then we're going to, under double quotes, we're going to put a name of a variable that we're going to create soon, apks. Then what's going to happen here? We're going to set it to update the cache, and we're going to set it to true. A cool thing would be to create templates for these on your editor, like template snippets, because that really will cut your time really short and save you some pain. Install recommends, nope. And all these flags are in the documentation. In this case, the install recommends is not no, it's false. And the state, we're going to use present. That means we want to install something. There are other flags that we can use. do check the documentation for these. The other thing we're going to use is the become call, and note that we are at the same level as the Ansible module. This is because the APT needs to, is a privileged action, so it needs to be elevated before it actually runs. Okay, it's really crucial. Now, there's actually an example of become, and we can dig through the documentation here for slightly. The search is not the best though. There are things that are really tricky to find, but it's there somewhere. And which variable on the Ansible configuration it's governed by. And in some cases you actually have examples. It's not this case though. Okay, here's a number of other modules. We've been basically wandering around searching for these. Going back into our notes here, we need to put a value on that variable. And that is the vars folder. And we're going to create another file called main.yaml because that's going to be loaded automatically. If not, we would have to load the variables on the beginning of the tasks YAML file on the top, very top. So we're going to create another file under vars. I'm going to call it main.yaml. We need to save this one first, right? And we're going to create another YAML file, apks, and then we can use an array again. If this grows, we can add more things to it. Our main task doesn't change. It's easier to maintain. So light HPD going here. We'll add other things to this file as we build this. Okay, I was going to give it a shot at running it, but it's really useful to make sure that you have the thing as complete as possible. And in this case, if we were to run it like this, we would have to revert the virtual machine, because ideally you want all your playbook to run in one shot. Because that's how it's going to be executed in a production. So we're going to create a file that is going to end up in the configuration light HTTPD configuration file, namely the configs variable. Right there, this file starts with a number, and when we run the light HTTPD enable mod, we'll enable a given module. So the template for that module, I already created it. It looks like that for a virtual host. And there are a number of variables there that we want to be replaced, right? There's a module that works with a Jinja 2 templates. And it's exactly what we're going to build on top of. There are also folders to be created, namely the sample, the host names for the virtual hosts, and the default host name. I've added those to my hosts file just to make this work, to illustrate the example. Okay, wrong shortcut there. Okay, so let's create another task. And the name for this task will be setup vhost configuration file. We're going to use the Ansible built-in template. We can see that in documentation, just as another example. Okay, that's how it looks like. It's aside the source, the destination, and a few other details like that. So let's recreate this. The lineup in YAML is pretty crucial, right? We can also specify things like who's the ownership of a file, the privileges of the file. We can include loops inside the templates. There are a number of very cool things that we can do. So let's set up the source is usually in relative to the particular role that we are under. So in this case, we can refer to it just by name, and we'll search for a folder called templates. We're going to use the destination as an environment variable to be more flexible. We're going to set up the mode for the file, and we're going to use 644. We're going to set the owner for root. And the same for the group ownership. We also need to run this with become, because only root is allowed to do operations in that location of the file system. We're going to save this, and then we're going to need to set our template in place. vhost.j2. Let's put that there. We have a number of things that we need to replace. That's the goal of a template, right? These things are really flexible. So this we'll take note of those names. We also need to create that folder there, the sample folder, and so we have a number of things to do still for this playbook to be completed. So let's save this template here. And again, the names of the variables are pretty important, okay? So we'll go back into our variables file, and we're going to put those names into variables right there. Okay, so we'll go to the end, hit an enter, and then we're going to get the names for those variables inside the template. We're going to put them there inside this file with their values. So the first one's going in is the path for the configuration itself. Okay, and before we do that, we actually need to know what variable name we assign that into, we give it there. So let's rescue that buffer, line httpd underscore vhost. Okay, let's put that in our notes. there is actually something missing. We need to add the name, the final name of the file, but we're going to leave it at that for now. Just saving the name of the variable, and we'll build things up as we go. We'll review it in the end. Okay. So a bit clumsy here with the editor. As we navigate this, and so yeah, finally the name of the variable here, being extra careful, because if you get the name wrong, then it won't be found and the play fails, right? Or you end up with a file that has that value to be replaced. Usually most of the time the playbook just fails because it's unable to find that variable. So this is the path where the the available configurations are set, right? There are also other variables inside the template that we need to assign values for, and so they also need to be added here. Okay, so we're going to copy those names. We could also give it a different name here, VT or V or sample or AS for Ansible. I chose RT just at random. So let's add first the default host name. Inside my host file, I have it set for debian.local, and the RT vhost will be ansible.debian.local. Like that. Okay, let's delete that buffer. Let's go back here. Let's do an initial inspection on this. So we are installing the LightHTTPD package, and then we are using a template to copy a configuration file to the destination. We also need to create that directory. How are we going to do that? As you probably already guessed, there's another module for that. It's another one from the built-in modules. So we need to create the samples directory. So built-in shell will be the module that I'm going to see if I can show, and pretty much most of the modules have, with a few exceptions, have examples. So this is what we're going to do. We can specify a number of arguments. We can specify the ch here. So if we need to change the current path into something to some location, so we're going to set up another task, and all they usually start with a name. All right, you'll see these in the screen as they execute. So create a sample vhost web root, Ansible built-in shell. And on this one, we need to add the command that we want to run in front of it. You can even specify the shell that you want to run this on. Before we do that, let's set up the rest of the module. Let's put in the arguments, we're going to specify the shell that we want to use. could also use the environment variable for this as well. Would actually be a good idea. But let's leave that for now. We're going to also need to put this in a become, just to make sure that we have enough privileges to do so. What else? What else do we need? Okay, so now we have the installation of our packet, our template, our web root created. We also need to enable the module and reload the service. So as you probably realize, most of these things will have small blocks. And in this case, we'll need to enable two things here. We're inside our vhost. We are relying on access log. And I was just checking there. And it turns out that access log is not enabled by default. And so we're going to have to enable two modules, which gives us a cool use case to show how you can use something called the loop together with an Ansible module. So we're going to use Ansible built-in shell once again. We're going to use the args and the executable, just like in the one before. And we're going to start a loop. Note where the loop is relative to the task itself, right? It's in the same lineup as the shell module. Now we're going to add two elements in here, the access log and the vhosts. So this means that these two modules, we want to execute a command in the shell to enable these modules. And as we loop, there will be a variable that will be created for us automatically called item. That is going to be replaced with a variable with the value for that specific entry in the loop. Okay. So I'll iterate over the options that we set up inside loop. And we'll replace them. The other thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to reload and restart the service. That's another module called built-in systemd service. So we are jumping ahead here before we finish that. We are going to start the service. Now, if we were to do this the proper way, we will be using a handler here. Would avoid us from duplicating this. And in this case, let's practice creating tasks. Although we haven't finished the one before that, but we'll finish it after this. systemd_service. We need to specify the name of the service that we want to change. In this case, that will be light HTTPD. Then we're going to specify what we want to do and which state is it supposed to be or left in. So daemon reload true, in case we need to reload the daemon for the configuration to make sure the configurations are reloaded. Enable true, we want to enable it so that it starts automatically. It's not start, it's state. Small typo there. All of these things will eventually bite us when we are, if we don't verify them, they will come back as errors. So it's really important for us to check things as you go. And this is another reason why the documentation is so useful. So I'm saving it there just to make sure that I don't lose anything. And let's do a small check here for the variable names, main task, main playbook. We actually can get rid of that. Okay, comparing things and the variables as well. So now we have the path for the module there, right? So it's not really complete. We need to specify the name of the file and the destination as well. We also need to adjust a few of other things in the tasks, namely what the command that we're going to use to enable the module, the name of the file name of the configuration file there. One of the options would be to put the name right here. That would be a bit of a hard stop if we want to try to reuse this variable. That wouldn't be that flexible. Another option would be to, in the destination, just append the final name to it. This way we have a variable that represents a path. If we want to add other configuration files, we can adjust that. So that one now is close to a final state. We have the destination, the source, the settings for how the file should be set or ownership wise and access privilege wise as well, with the mode and the ownership and everything else. Let's continue checking our playbooks, our playbook tasks. Let's give it a run. Let's give it a shell and run. This will fail, right? There's a ton of things missing here. So let's go back. And let's amend the file, right? In this particular case, nothing crucial happened because it failed. We have a module that is calling shell, but it's not doing anything. And we can we can adjust things just to check if it's the place. Reality is not really that, right? There's a command missing there that we to actually specify what we want to do. In here, the location of the binder that we want to run oftentimes is not on path, so we need to specify it by full path. That is the light HTTPD enable mod. That's usually on USR SBIN. Let's just confirm that on the other screen, just to make sure that we get everything right, and then we'll put it here in the module. Okay, now there's the variable that I was talking about, having the item there. Note the double quotes there, 'cause they're really, it's crucial. Okay, as it loops through the options that we set under loop, that item will become that particular entry. So first will be vhost and then access log. Okay, and what's going to do is going to create a symbolic link from the configs available into the configs dash enabled. Typo there. Let's save this. Let's rerun it and see what's up now. Okay, seems that we have another error. There's a lint for this. There's an Ansible lint that we can use, and it usually helps out in these cases when we're trying to figure out if a given tag is lined up where, like relative to the module. Is it something that's meant to be as an argument for the module, or just right after it, or slightly under it? That's basically YAML kind of pain, I would say. And after getting everything lined up, it should just go, right? We're going to it's running the first flag, the first task, the second one, the third, and then the last one related to the service. We have a fail. So apparently there's an issue with that block. We can go on the documentation once again, because it's complaining about a key. So let's see if we have a typo here. I think we've spotted it's not stored, it's state. Sometimes the messages we get are not that helpful, but eventually with a bit of back and forth, you should be able to do it. We're going to take this opportunity to show something cool, something else called tags. Say we want to execute just this tag alone, this task alone. We're going to create a tag, and we're going to assign a tag to this particular task, right? And so by doing this and using the dash tags reload, what it's going to do is it's going to run the tasks with that specific tag. And so we ran a single operation from the playbook. Looks easy, right? We have a few errors here just to illustrate how the operations go, even when things don't go quite as expected. Few typos in the configuration files, just everything that would happen in as if you're coding it yourself, right? Another option of doing something like this would be to use Fabric. So we can check if the service is running, right? Port 80 is up. That is okay. So cool. Let's take a look at the LightShift configs enable. Okay, 10 vhost and accessible log, it seems to be on. Let's take a look at the configuration for the vhosts. So Debian.local, so our variables got replaced. Amazing, cool. Let's take a look at the sample directory, also here. Great news. Let's try to create a file in the web root just to test the module, right? To test everything, to have everything tested. But we need to escalate first, right? It's owned by root, and so we need to become root first. Let's use the su. Now we're root, and then we can echo something into a file in for var the sample. Let's call it index.html, so that the server catches it automatically. And let's have this tested from outside the VM, right? So the proper way of testing this. Let's create a new terminal. I have added these host names to my host file. So I'll do verbose to have everything out just in case. We'll do the right / ansible.debian.local. And hello is on the screen. Okay, going what to go from here? Well, we can see how we can use handlers. We can also just adjust things to enable PHP, for example. That would be another interesting set. There will be a folder called .ansible created, in this case under the user that we logged in with SSH on for Ansible. This is where a lot of the things will end up, all right? And if someone is keeping a close eye on it, it might get a hold of that file, which may or may not contain sensitive information. So beware of that. Also do test out things, making sure that it's clean, everything is cleaned up after everything runs. And this was it. So this was it. We took a look at how we can compose a playbook, how we can protect credentials, if we do mistakes, how they look like with Ansible. It's a YAML format, so some of these things is to be expected. It's really important to look at the documentation, the keys and whatnot. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm planning to expand on this, so I'll see you in the next one.